And for more, we're very pleased to be joined by the senior senator from New Jersey, Bob Menendez, Democrat. And Senator, thank you very much for a few minutes. And I want to start close to home if I could. I know how hard you fought here to get funding for Sandy, post-Sandy, the seaside communities like, obviously, the poor people were devastated there. And I'm curious, from a personal level, it's just not fair for these people. And I'm also wondering if Washington can be of any help for them in their recovery.
Well, Richard, our hearts go out to the people of Seaside Park and Seaside Heights, and it's just an incredible challenge in the aftermath of everything that we've come back from Superstorm Sandy to have a major fire like this. And so our thoughts and prayers with all of those families who own the businesses and all who are affected by it. We're in contact with the governor's office, and to the extent that there is a federal opportunity, we'll try to see. I think, a typical set of fire, we'll have to find out the actual causes here, might not be an avenue for any federal relief, but there is already assistance from Sandy that is still pending, some of which is discretionary at the governor's office that may be a venue.
There's another issue in your state that you've been very involved in recently. We saw over 10 days in Newark, 10 homicides, and you're trying to get DOJ to help as well. Can you tell people who are unfamiliar with just how bad things have been there and how you're trying to get the feds to pitch in and help?
Well, Newark overall has had a good effort on overall crime and bringing it down, and Mayor Book has done a good job of that. But unfortunately, we've had a rash where we've had these strings of shootings, and it just seemed to me that we need to have the federal government assist the largest state in the city in meeting some of these challenges. All of these communities are faced with fiscal challenges. All of them have had challenges in terms of their police departments. And so what I simply said to the Attorney General of the United States is, look, this is an extraordinary set of circumstances. Consider giving cops funding to the city of Newark and any other assistance you can give so that we can stem the tide of this particular violence that has taken place.
And it would translate potentially into literally more cops on the beat, right?
Absolutely, and the more cops on the beat that exist, and particularly since Newark has a good system of tracking where its overall crime is taking place and can focus those cops on the beat into areas where there seems to be a challenge, means we're less likely to see another shooting or another homicide. And that would be extraordinarily helpful. And so we want to help Mayor Booker be able to get the resources he needs to do the job I know he has and can do.
I want to switch gears here. As many know, you're the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, and I think you spoke for many. After we saw what Mr. Putin had to say in an op-ed in, of all places, the Times, where he took the U.S. to task for our position on Syria at the very time that we're trying to negotiate some kind of diplomatic solution. For people who didn't see, this was the Senate earlier this week.
I got an email with what President Putin had to say, and I have to be honest, it was at dinner, and I almost wanted to vomit. The reality is I worry when someone who came up to the KGB tells us what is in our national interest and what is not. And, it really raises the questions of how serious this Russian proposal is.
To that point, Senator, it seems that everybody wants a diplomatic solution to this, but how skeptical should people be given the actors we're talking about, both Assad and also maybe some of the agendas Russia has themselves, that this thing's going to have both enforceability and transparency that will get to the bottom of where these chemical weapons are, let alone get rid of them?
Well, Richard, that's the key question that you've just posed. And look, the door to diplomacy was open. It would be foolish to slam it shut without testing it. And that's what we're in the midst of doing. But here's what has to happen, and let's understand why we're even at a point in which the possibility for diplomacy can be considered. The only reason that Russia came forth with this proposal is because of the potential credible use of military force against Assad for using chemical weapons against innocent civilians, including killing 400 children. And it crosses an international red line and violates international law. And not only must we send a message to Assad in Syria that the use of chemical weapons against innocent civilians cannot stand, but it's also a global message that no one should consider using chemical weapons, because if they do, understand that there's enormous consequences. That's the first instance here. And only the credible use of military force brought us to a point in which the Russians came forth with a proposal, because the Russians figured out, well, not only are they going to hurt his ability to deliver those chemical weapons, in doing so they're going to degrade his overall ability to try to continue to fight to stay in power, and that's not in our interest. So this proposal has to do several things. It has to have Syria join the chemical weapons ban treaty. It has to have Syria give, in my mind, in very short order, a full listing to the United Nations in confidence, obviously, because we don't want a world listing of where these sites are, but to the Security Council, a full listing of where all the chemical weapons sites are and what are at them. It has to create international access for international weapons inspectors to be able to go in and make the assessment, and then a process by which we destroy these. And it has to have a process by which you can ultimately implement any such agreement, with consequences if there's a failure to implement the agreement, because unfortunately the chemical weapons ban treaty, while is important to have somebody to sign on to as an international obligation, the treaty itself doesn't have any clauses for being able to deal with violations of it. So you have to go back to the Security Council. That's why from the very beginning we need some type of enforceable mechanism here to ensure that whatever Syria might agree to, that it is ultimately enforceable.
Let's say, Senator, that this diplomatic process doesn't have the teeth in it, and it isn't something that we can subscribe to hypothetically at the end. With so many conflicted lawmakers that we've spoken to, I think they can articulate their legitimate concerns if we took force against Syria, what some dominoes that could happen. But could you articulate, since you're privy to intelligence, the rest of us aren't, what are the risks of inaction, not just with Assad and the message it does, but to that region? Talk about the downside, not just to taking action, but the downside to not taking action if there's not a diplomatic solution.
Well, Richard, there are no good options in Syria. So sometimes you have to deal with the hand you're dealt. And that's what we have here. There are no good options in Syria. But I strongly believe, as someone who voted against the war in Iraq, as someone who has been an advocate for a more accelerated drawdown in Afghanistan, that, in fact, we must keep the credible use of force on the table, and if the diplomatic option fails, to consider the limited action, no American boots on the ground, but certainly limited action to destroy and deter Assad's delivery system of chemical weapons against innocent civilians. Not only to stop that slaughter via chemical weapons in Syria, but to send a global message. What is the Ayatollah thinking about in Iran as he watches these set of circumstances unfold? The international community has been telling Iran, do not even think about rushing towards nuclear weapons. Well, if they see that we're unwilling to react to Assad's use of chemical weapons, they'll just think that the world is bluffing. What does the dictator of North Korea think about our admonitions about what he will do in the Korean Peninsula and within the region, whether it is the firing of rockets, whether it's nuclear capacity? And by the way, he has one of the world's largest chemical weapon caches as well. What message does he get? what message do others get in the world? And what message do our allies get when we say to them, stay the course because we have your back, and do not act precipitously? If they do not believe that we will actually act in a way that will in fact have their back, then they will be pursuing their own national security interests as they deem it. And that can always have consequences to us as well. So this is far beyond Syria, although in the first instance it is about stopping Assad. And in doing so, you send a global message that I think is very strong. And that's why this is such a critical issue in the national security interests of the United States.
And finally, Senator, before I let you go, a calendar question. With all the important stuff that we're talking about, there is a looming deadline of September 30th. And that's where it's the end of our fiscal year on the federal level, and we could get into government shutdown here over the debt ceiling. It is the silly season again. Please tell me that we're going to get something done on this next week, because I understand the week after that they're not in, that we're not going to add on top of all the real challenges, at least what I think is a manufactured one with this debt ceiling. We're not going to go through the same rigmarole as last year, are we?
Well, you know, that's really in the hands of the Republicans. You know, they're the ones who brought the country to its knees over the question of debt ceiling. But beyond debt ceiling, the reality is that you've got a whole bunch of members of Congress who's even bucking their Speaker in the House of Representatives over the question of defunding, you know, the President's health care law. Imagine stopping the whole government of the United States because of their opposition to a law that is the law of the land, that was upheld by the Supreme Court of the United States, and that is moving forward to implementation and giving millions of Americans the opportunity to finally have health care, and millions others who were discriminated against to be free from such discrimination in pre-existing conditions, lifetime caps, and a whole host of other things. So they've already eclipsed the debt ceiling as the issue that they want to shut down the government over. They want to shut down the government over the President's health care plan. I just think that is extraordinary, and that's probably a kind word to use in this set of circumstances. And I just hope the American people send a very clear message that that's not tolerable, and that we'll get through, you know, having some type of continuation of the government, even if it's an extension for a period of time while we work through these issues and also deal with the debt ceiling. We're just really just about paying your obligations, not about really raising debt for the future, but about paying the obligations that the Congress already voted for.
Well, I know you got a lot on your plate here and not a lot of time. I wish you the best of luck, Senator. It sounds like you're going to need it back in the nation's capital. Thanks again.
Thank you, Richard.